Hello everyone, in this tutorial I'll be taking you through the process of how to draft blouses like this that comes with straps around the neckline that you can tie into different styles of your choice. We will begin drafting from the back, and from the tip of your paper you are going to come down by 1 inch. This will serve as the starting line or your border line. I have gone ahead to mark my 1 inch and I'm going to draw out a straight line. The next thing we're going to do is to mark our zipper allowance so that we can start the rest of our construction from there. So because my ruler is not as straight now, I'll mark 1 inch at different points of my paper so it's easier for me to connect and have a straight line. Please note that this step is optional. You can decide to cut your back on fold. But for me, even when I'm not adding zipper to the back of my top or dresses, I like to have it sit like a blazer or a jacket back, if you understand what I mean. But if you don't, please leave out the zipper allowance and cut your back on fold. We'll proceed to mark out our back half length. The back half length I'm working with is 15 inches. So I mark 15 inches on the two extreme sides of my paper and I'll make a straight line. Then I'll go ahead and label that as my waistline. From the border line at the top of my paper, I'm going to mark downwards 1 inch and make a straight line. This line is going to serve as my back shoulder line. I'll go on to label that line as my back shoulder just so that I don't mix any line up. So when you are doing yours, ensure to label all your lines properly. Then from my back shoulder, I am going to mark my armhole measurement. The armhole depth I'm working with is 7.75. So I'm marking that and afterwards I'll make a straight line. Then I'll label that line as my armhole line. Now I am going to find the midpoint between my back shoulder and my armhole line. This is going to serve as my across back measurement. So I've gone ahead to mark mine and I'm making a straight line. I'm labeling that also as my across back line. Because of my camera coverage, I will leave my waist to my hip for now and focus on the top part of this pattern. On my shoulder line, I'm going to mark half of my back measurement. And whatever the half of my back measurement is, I will subtract 0.25 from that and I'll mark the result on my across back and also on my armhole measurement. I hope you get that. Then I'm going to connect those 3 points together. Because these blouses are not meant to come with zippers, ensure you add between 2 inches to 4 inches to your bust, to your waist and to your hip measurement before you start dividing by 4. I hope you get that. This will add ease so that it's easier for you to be able to wear and remove these blouses when you wear them. On my armhole line, I'm going to mark my bust divided by 4. On my waist, I'm going to mark my waist divided by 4. Then I'll connect those 2 points together. Ensure that when you're taking all these measurements, take them away from your zipper allowance. And with your armhole curve ruler, you're going to make your armhole curve, ensuring that these 3 points connect. So I'm going to set my armhole ruler and then make my armhole curve. Now we'll work on the neckline. The neck width I'm working with is 3 inches, and after I've marked my neck width, you're going to square up that line. Then you mark 0.5 upwards and make your neckline curve. Then I'm going to connect my neck line to my shoulder line. What I'm doing here is to add all my sewing allowances. I basically use 0.5 on both the armhole and the shoulder line and the neckline as well. The next thing I'm doing is to eliminate zipper bulge. And on the waistline at the zipper allowance, I'm going to go in by 0.75 or 1 inch. Most times I use 1 inch, but you can also use 0.75. And I'm going to connect that 1 inch mark to the armhole line, like so. Then we'll continue the rest of our construction. I am extending my zipper allowance, and that is why I'm marking 1 inch at that point of my pattern paper. Then I'll connect that back to the line that comes from the top of my paper. On my waistline, I'm going to mark downwards my hip line. The hip line I'm working with is 10 inches. I'm going to mark that and make a straight line. I'm labeling that line as my hip line or hip point. Then on that hip line, I'm going to mark my hip divided by 4, and I'm adding 1 inch sewing allowance. On my waistline, I'm also adding my sewing allowance as well as the armhole line. Then I'll connect these 3 points together. I'm also connecting my sewing allowances. Then to finish up my zipper bulge elimination, on the hip line, I'm going to go upwards by 2 inches, and that is the line I am marking there. Then I'll connect that point back to my waist, and at this point I've successfully eliminated zipper bulge. At the base of the top, you're going to go upwards by 2 inches because most times you don't want your top to look straight. And then with my curve ruler, I'm going to make a curve line at the base of the top like so. Then I'm going to measure the distance between my armhole and my waistline because I will need that when I am constructing my front. So I marked that and recorded what my result was. Then I'm cutting out my pattern because we're done. At that corner, I'm going to blend in so that I do not have a sharp corner. Then I continue with cutting out the rest of my pattern. And this is what I have at the end of the day. I'll set that aside, then we'll begin with the front construction. And on the front line, I'm also making 1 inch margin or 1 inch starting line like we did for the back. Then afterwards, I'm going to mark my front half length measurement. For the front, I'm working with 17.5 inches. I'll mark that on the 2 sides of my paper, and I'm going to make a straight line. I'm labeling that line as my waist line. The next thing I'm going to do is to mark 1.25, and that is going to serve as my front shoulder line, and I'm also marking my bust point. The bust point I'm working with is 11.5 inches. I've marked those 2 points and I'm going to make a straight line. I'll label the first line as my front shoulder line and the second line as my bust line. The next thing I'm going to mark is my armhole line, and from the front shoulder line, I'm going to mark my armhole depth. And I'll label that line as my armhole line. The next thing I'm going to do is to find my across chest measurement. Some people will find the midpoint between the shoulder line and the armhole line, but I don't do that. The formula I normally use is my front half length minus my back half length plus 2 inches. So for me, my front half length is 17.5 inches and my back half length is 15 inches. So if I subtract my back from my front, I have 2.5 inches. Then I'll go ahead to add 2 inches standard to my 2.5. Then I'll arrive at 4.5 inches. So from my bust point line, I'm going to mark upwards 4.5 inches, and that is going to serve as my across chest measurement. So if you don't want to go through this route, just find the midpoint between your front shoulder line and your armhole line. That also works, but I prefer this method I just used. I hope you get it. And I'm going to label that line as my across chest line. After this, the next thing I'm going to do is to impute my shoulder measurements divided by 2 on my front shoulder line. I'm going to subtract 0.75 from that and mark the result on both my across chest measurement and my armhole line. Then I'll connect those 3 points together. On the armhole line, I'm going to mark my bust measurement divided by 4, and with my armhole curve, I'm going to make my armhole curve, ensuring that these 3 points connect. On my waistline, I'm going to mark my waist measurement divided by 4, and I'm adding my sewing allowance. On my armhole line, I'll also go ahead to add my sewing allowance. Then I'll connect these points together. Remember that we measure the distance between our back armhole and waistline. This is the time to use it. So I went ahead to mark the result and I'm checking out the difference. So my front is longer than my back with 2 inches. So from the bust line, I'm going to mark downwards that 2 inches. And also on the bust line, I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple measurement. And from there, I'll mark another 1 inch. And I'll connect that point to my 2 inches mark on the side of my pattern. I hope you get it. Then I'm going to define my bust dart, and to do that I had to open up my paper. So I'm going to match my side together like that, and after I've done that, I'm going to connect my waist and my armhole line again. So this is my new side line, and with my tracing wheel I'm going to trace out that line, and when I open it up you see dotted lines on those sides. Then I'll connect that together. Then the next thing I'm doing is to add my sewing allowances. On my neckline, that's the starting line, I'm going to mark my neck width measurement, and from there I'm going to mark downwards my neck depth. So I'm working with 3 by 3 inches, and that is what I am marking out. And after marking my line with my armhole curve, I'm going to draw out my neckline. Then I'll go ahead and connect my neckline to my shoulder. After that, I'm going to add all my sewing allowances. I'll go ahead and open up my paper so that I can construct my waist to my hip line. So I'm marking downwards my hip point, which is 10 inches. I'll mark that and make a straight line. And on this hip line, I'm going to mark my hip divided by 4, and I'm adding my sewing allowance as well. Then after this, I'll connect my hip to my waist. Then I'm going to eliminate that pointed corner at the waist. And like we did for the back, we're going to blend in the base of the top. So I'm going upwards by 2 inches from my hip line, and with my armhole curve or any curved ruler you have, you're going to blend in that line like so. And at this point, we can cut out our pattern. Now that we have both the front and the back pattern done, we're going to proceed to working on our straps. And the first thing to do is to mark 1 inch from your center front around the neckline. Then you come downwards by about 3 inches, and you're going to make like a v-neck around that area. And what you're going to do is you're going to cut out that small portion, but I'm folding it for now. So when you cut out, your pattern should look like that. Then from your actual neckline, not the sewing allowance, you're going to start measuring what you have on your neckline. I am starting with the front now. I have about 4 inches. Then I'll proceed to measure my back. And since my front ended at 4 inches, I'm going to continue from that 4 inches, not from my sewing allowance or my zipper allowance, but my actual neckline. So I'll put my 4 inches on that line, then continue to mark. So I have about 7.25, and I'm going to note that down. Moving on to the straps, I'm going to be making a 1 inch horizontal line at the base of my paper. From that 1 inch border line, you are going to mark upwards about 5 inches, depending on the size of straps that you want really. But remember that you are going to be folding your strap into 2, and that is why I am marking 5 inches plus the sewing allowance I need. So I have marked my 5 inches and I'm making a straight line. The next thing we're going to do is to find the midpoint of this long rectangle that we have now. We're doing this because you know your straps is going to be sewn around your neck like on fold. When you find that midpoint, you're going to also make a new line on that midpoint. The next thing you're going to do is to mark your neckline measurement. Remember, we measure the front and the back. So here you are going to impute whatever your own result is. You are going to mark these points on both the top and the bottom of our rectangle, and you are going to connect that in a straight line. And from this new line we just made, you are going to mark at least 20 inches, and that is going to be the length of your strap from your neckline. So you're going to mark 20 to 25 inches depending on how long you want it to be. So I'll go ahead and mark that. I'm going to be marking that at the top and at the base of my rectangle as well. And after doing this, I'm going to make another straight line. From this new line, I'm going to mark inwards about 1.5 inches. I'll do that on both sides of the rectangle. And what you're going to do is to connect those points back to the tip of the line. If you can see it, our strap is already coming together nicely. The next thing to do is from our 1.5-inch mark, you're going to go out by about 0.75 inch. You're going to mark that on both sides of the rectangle. I am going to extend that line like so. And on the extended line, I'm going to mark my 0.75 again, just so that I don't exceed or shorten that point. So from there, I'm going to connect back to the first line we created. We'll repeat the same process on the other side. And that is basically it for the neckline and strap. It is wider at the tip and it just narrows down like that. Thank you all for watching. Do well to like, subscribe if you haven't, share this video with your friends. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to drop them in the chat box, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.